Hi and welcome back to Dusty Book Sniffers. I'm Nicole and today we are talking about Memoirs of a Geisha and what my thoughts are. So let's get into it. Well, good morning or good evening everybody and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with me while I prattle on about the books that I have read. So if you are new here or a returning viewer and you've yet to subscribe, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it. And then that way you're not going to miss out on any future posts. So today we are here to talk about Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. This was published back in 1997, so this is right up my alley for Dusty Book Sniffers. And it has 503 pages and it is a historical fiction. And I read this both in audio and in the physical. I listened, there was a free audio on YouTube, but there was only like 29 chapters read by a fan of the book, and she was brilliant. I will leave a link down below where you can find that, but unfortunately she only reads up to chapter 29 and then I read the rest of the book. So I did a little bit of immersive reading with this one, and I also did a little bit of reading with my eyes and then also a little bit of audio while I was working away. All right, so let me just start off by saying that this is not a memoir by any, regardless of what the title. It is a total fiction work. It is not based on anybody's true story at all. I had to look that up because I wasn't 100% sure. The story is intriguing as well as engaging. I really enjoyed the way of the pacing and all that sort of stuff, and makes me want to learn a little bit more about the Japanese geisha and what it all entails and stuff like that. So it's given me, it's provoked me to read a little bit further, to look a little bit further into another culture, which I always love that about books, to make me, you know, I know of geishas and all that sort of stuff, but you know, what is behind it. And we're following the main story. Now it is fiction, as I said. I'm going to try and pronounce the names. Bear with me, okay, because I'm not always really good at it, but okay, so the main character is a young girl named Chihiro. Anyway, we're following a young girl. She eventually, her name starts out as Chihiro, I think is how you pronounce it, and then she becomes Sayuri as a geisha. So I'm just going to call her Sayuri through the book because that's pretty much what she ends up being for the majority of the book. All right, so we start out in a small fishing village where she is playing and walking along the seashore, and she's talking about her family, and her mother is quite ill. It turns out her mother is terminally ill, and her father is always sitting in the lounge room and he's fixing his nets and all that sort of stuff. And so it just gives you a little bit of a background of where she's come from. And by a chance meeting one day, she meets Mr. Tanaka, and basically names are going to escape me through this book. And basically he meets her and he's struck by the beauty of her as a young child. She's very beautiful. She's got these beautiful grey eyes, which is quite unusual in the Japanese culture, and so he's struck by that. Essentially, she ends up like hurting herself, and that's how she's met him. And he takes her home, meets the father, finds out that the mother is terminally ill, and he puts a proposal towards the father of actually helping to rehouse them. Because he won't be able to look after them. This would be quite upsetting for a lot of people. I found it quite disturbing myself, but I had to keep reminding myself that this is a fictional work and it is another person's culture, and who am I to judge? Okay, it is set around the time of the Depression and also around World War II. So it's across that timeline. And so she ends up in taken by this man to a older lady who examines them in their nether regions and finds that her and her sister are both intact, because her sister is also taken along with this as well, and they're intact. And so subsequently the girls are then sold to this gentleman, who then sells them to sells Sayuri to a lady in Gion, I think it is pronounced, and her sister goes somewhere else. So they're separated after the death of their mother. They weren't even there for the death of their mother or anything. This all happened before she died. And so they never actually got to see their mother go to the funeral or anything like that. So essentially the elder sister is only in the front part of the story, and basically she is sold into prostitution, and subsequently she escapes and leaves, and you never hear about her again. So it is mainly following Sayuri and her progression through her life. And I think from memory, I didn't write this down, but I think she was about 6 when she went to the Okia, which is where she will live her life as in servitude to them until she becomes apprentice geisha, until eventually she becomes a geisha. So, and then there's all sorts of problems that happen at the Okia. She didn't know any of this, that this was going to be happening or anything like that. And so she's not very happy at the Okia. She wants to get back to her sister. And so she tries to escape a couple of times, and one time she breaks her foot. And so everything that she does in the Okia, from the food that she eats to the things that she breaks to the things that she needs, medical expenses and all that sort of stuff, a running tally is made. And when she becomes an apprentice geisha and eventually a geisha, she will have to pay back every cent that she has incurred in her time living there. So then it sort of flows on from there, and her struggles. She meets Pumpkin, and then she meets the senior geisha, which is Hatsumo. And Hatsumo doesn't like her because she can see her as a threat. And again, the eyes are always, everybody's drawn to her eyes of how beautiful she is, and all that sort of stuff. So basically, as this is progressing on, she's in servitude, so she's working, and Hatsumo is making her life very difficult. There is also another young girl, a couple of years older than Sayuri, and she's called Pumpkin, and basically she has another name, but everybody refers to her, and throughout the book she's referred to as Pumpkin, and she makes friends with her, but then eventually Hatsumo takes Pumpkin under her wing and becomes essentially her older sister. And so they can see, and then another character come in, and I'm sorry, I didn't write her name down. I think it's Mamasa, I think they pronounce it. I'm not too sure. But anyway, she basically comes into the story later on. So as a child, she is doing all the things in servitude to Hatsumo and to the Okia, and to mother and to auntie and to grandmother. And grandmother's quite nasty, and auntie is helping running the show, and mother is the owner of the Okia, sorry. And so one day she's out doing some errands, and she's really upset, and she's crying, and a gentleman comes upon her and is struck in awe of her eyes and her beauty and how beautiful she is, and that goes on a bit about that. And and so he gives her a handkerchief to wipe up her tears and all that sort of stuff. And it's the first time she's ever really felt any kindness from anybody. So she holds on to that handkerchief, and she keeps it with her at all times, and she somewhat becomes obsessed with who we know as, further on in the book, as the chairman. And so as she's growing older, she becomes unbeknownst to her, the chairman behind the scenes is making sure that her life as a geisha will be one that is not detrimental to her or anything like that. And Mamato comes into it, I think that's how you pronounce it, comes into it, and so she then becomes her older sister when she becomes an apprentice. Prior to that, she didn't have much luck, and Hatsumo had made it so difficult for her to become even an apprentice geisha. It was looking like she wasn't going to become a geisha. She would just end up being a maid, but this other girl coming into it took her under her wing and trained her in the ways of the geisha until eventually she became a geisha. And it was all centered around the businessman and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much the premise of the story, and it just goes on from there, and it just gives you the ups and downs of everything that's happening in that. And so I've just got some more notes here. So the thing to remember, if you haven't read this book before, everything about the geisha is pretty much for sale. So everything from her time to her virginity. So they have a thing where they auction off the virginity of the girls to the highest bid. Although not auction, like there are bids, but it's done in private. It's not crass or anything like that. It's all private and under like very hush-hush and whatnot. but the highest bidder gets her virginity, and that is paid for, and it's quite sought after. And then eventually, like, her ultimate goal is to find a dana where she becomes the mistress to someone, and they look after her for the rest of her life and basically buy everything that she needs and keeps her as a mistress and whatnot. And that's the ultimate goal of the geisha. But their time, as they're younger, they're spending time in tea houses and entertaining and all that sort of stuff. So they do dancing and this and that and the other. And so it was a really interesting book to read. Overall, I really liked it. I honestly didn't know whether it was a true story or not, and I had to look that up after I started reading it. But I did find it. There are some actually interesting little facts that you can find about this book. So as I said, it's not a memoir. It is not based on a true story at all. It is all totally fictional. However, there was a geisha named Mikiyoko Izuaki, I think is how you pronounce it, and she sued the author for defamation because some of the content in this book was actually based on real life people in her life that she had talked about with the author, but it was a private conversation. It was never meant to be used in the book. And so I've got a few things here that are little tidbits on some notes that I found of things that why she sued and what the comparison was. Okay, so there were several things. The reason why Miss Iwazaki ended up suing the author, it was because there was just far too many comparisons in the book that were made to her family members and or to her real life. So the senior geisha, who was very abusive, that was in regards to her older sister. The adoption, that was too close to what happened to Miss Iwazaki. She was actually sought after by an Okiya and adopted by them. Also, Pumpkin was also towards her sister, so they based Pumpkin off her older sister. The relationship with the older man known as the chairman, this man was said to be 20 years older. In real life, she dated the man who was almost two decades for a few years, so it was very related. So she was right after that. The Baron in the novel as the Dana, he was also her sister's Dana, so that was too close. The needles in the hem that were once Suri becomes popular, she notes that one day that the hem of her favourite kimono had needles stuck into it by the other jealous geishas. This actually happened in her real life, in the plaintiff's real life. And the highest, I'm going to try and say it, which is to deflower. It's got a particular name that they call it in Japanese culture, and it's basically to take someone's virginity. That was also too close to her life as well. So basically, overall, Miss Iwazaki was not very happy with the author after disclosing this to him in private, and it wasn't meant to be used, and then he's drawn inspiration and she was not very happy about it. So she made a complaint against him. I haven't found out the ruling on that because that was back in 2005, I believe, and so I haven't found out the ruling, and that may be a non-disclosure and that's why it's not there. So the book they're like having private conversations with someone and then them using those comparisons. I mean, that's a risk you run when you have a conversation with an author. And obviously he's approached her to talk to her, but the author had no background in anything to do with Japanese culture or the geisha part of the culture either. So it was quite distressing to a lot of people that he had no idea or anything about that, and then he's gone on and wrote about it. Now the movie also, subsequently the movie came out as well because of the book, and subsequently the Japanese people were not happy about the portrayals of the characters and even the actresses that were used in it, and the movie wasn't actually even filmed in Japan. It was actually filmed in the US, so overall, I was really happy with the book. I found out some interesting facts. I want to learn a little bit more about this, about the geisha and what the process is and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, there is some truths to the processes and what happens in the geisha community and whatnot. And yeah, so for me, historical fiction with underlying romances and slightly obsessive compulsive behaviours of obsessing over the chairman. I did thoroughly enjoy the story. As I said, I really couldn't put it down. I really did want to see what happened in the end, and if she did end up getting everything that she wanted, and how it all turned out for her. It seems like a very lonely life and a very sad life, and you know, a life of that they don't own. Like, they are essentially owned by their okias, which are essentially where they live and are looked after by the people there and whatnot. But I gave it a 4-star read because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to learning some more things about it. I am going to be watching the movie in the near future, and hopefully I can come back on and talk a little bit more about the comparisons between the two. I haven't been able to have the time to watch it, but I just wanted to have a bit of a talk about it. So we're probably going to hear a little bit more about Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Gold. But that's it from me today. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have made it this far, don't forget to leave me a book emoji down below. And also, if you have yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it. And then that way you're not going to miss out on any future posts. And as always, happy reading, everybody. And I will see you all again next time. Bye for now.